Okay, so get that Donald Trump just nominated Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
RFK Jr.
to be in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Wow.
HHS,
Yeah.
the agency that oversees basically everything health-related
Wow.
in the U.S., food safety drug approvals, Medicare, Medicaid, you name it.
It's a big one.
It's huge. Wild, right?
Yeah, that's it's definitely a head spinner.
For sure.
And definitely unexpected.
Right.
Given Kennedy's outspoken stance on, well, a lot of things that directly relate to the HHS's work.
I mean, this is the guy who's built his career on challenging mainstream science, especially when it comes to vaccines.
Exactly.
And now he could be calling the shots for the entire American healthcare system.
Yeah.
What does that even look like?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess we need to dig into what we know about Kennedy's approach to health.
Okay.
And see how it might translate to leading a massive government agency.
All right, so RFK Jr., he comes from this legendary political family.
Oh, yeah,
But his views often clash with the Democratic Party line.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you say?
He actually challenged Biden for the Democratic nomination.
That's right.
Before pivoting to endorse Trump.
Yeah, and that endorsement came with a pretty interesting deal.
It did.
Right?
Yeah.
Kennedy agreed to support Trump in exchange for a key role in shaping health policy.
A very key role.
Well, yeah. I remember Trump saying something like he was going to let him go wild on health.
I remember that quote.
So what exactly does Kennedy want to unleash?
Well, he's got his sights set on a few major targets. Big food, big pharma, and government agencies themselves.
Okay.
He's all about shaking up the status quo, and he's not afraid to take on powerful interests.
So let's unpack this. Starting with big food. What's Kennedy's beef with them?
Well, he's been very vocal about the dangers of processed foods, additives, herbicides like Roundup, basically anything he sees as detrimental to our health. He wants to crack down on these industries and implement stricter regulations, potentially modeling them after Europe.
Interesting.
Which has tougher standards in many areas.
So he's all for government intervention when it comes to the food we eat. But what about pharmaceuticals?
Right.
Isn't he all about personal choice and freedom when it comes to medical treatments?
Yeah, that's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
On one hand, he wants to restrict Big Pharma's advertising and influence, even proposing to bar them from advertising on TV.
Really?
But on the other hand, he wants to loosen regulations on alternative therapies.
Oh, wow.
Which some experts see as potentially risky.
So more regulation for the food industry, less for pharmaceuticals. That seems a bit inconsistent.
It definitely raises some questions about his overall approach. And then there's the big one. Vaccines.
Right.
Kennedy's been very clear about his belief that vaccines are unsafe and ineffective.
Yeah.
Which flies in the face of pretty much all scientific evidence.
I mean, you can't really talk about RFK Jr. and HHS without addressing the elephant in the room, right? This stance has obviously made him a very controversial figure, and it's something we'll definitely need to explore further.
It's crucial to understanding the potential implications of this nomination. I mean, imagine a head of HHS who actively undermines public trust in one of the most effective public health interventions in history.
That's a chilling thought. So where do we go from here? What are the chances this nomination even makes it through the Senate?
Well, that's a good question. Even with a Republican majority, his views on vaccines are bound to raise some eyebrows. We've already seen mixed reactions from lawmakers.
Yeah.
With some voicing strong opposition and others cautiously welcoming his focus on challenging Big Pharma. It'll be interesting to see how this confirmation process plays out.
Yeah, it's a political roller coaster for sure. But let's step back for a second and think about what this nomination says about the current state of American politics. We've got a president-elect who seems to be prioritizing shaking things up over, well, maybe experience and expertise.
It definitely speaks to a growing distrust of established institutions and experts, and it raises some pretty big questions about the future of American healthcare. What does it mean when someone with such controversial and scientifically unfounded views is potentially in charge of our nation's health?
It's a lot to process, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for all of us to try to wrap our heads around this because it could have a huge impact on our lives.
It could. You're absolutely right. This is a deep dive that hits close to home for everyone, and we need to be paying close attention.
So you're telling me the guy who thinks vaccines cause autism could be making decisions about my healthcare?
It's definitely raising a lot of eyebrows.
This is surreal.
And not just because of the vaccine issue. Remember, Kennedy's vision for HHS goes far beyond that.
Right, he's got this whole anti-establishment fight the power vibe going on.
He does.
He's taking aim at big food, Big Pharma, even the government itself.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that even work when he's the government now?
Well, that's the paradox, isn't it? He wants to dismantle systems from within.
Right.
For example, he wants to completely overhaul the FDA.
The FDA.
You know, the agency that approves new drugs and ensures our food is safe.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So walk me through that. What exactly does he want to change about the FDA?
He's proposed some pretty radical ideas.
Like what?
On one hand, he wants to increase regulations on things like food dyes and preservatives,
Right.
which aligns with his focus on healthy eating.
Okay.
But on the other hand, he wants to weaken regulations around alternative therapies.
Really?
Like psychedelics and stem cell treatments, which are still largely unproven.
Wait, so more regulations for some things, less for others. How does that make sense?
It's a bit of a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
And then there's his proposal to eliminate the fees that drug companies pay the FDA.
Hold on. What are those fees for?
Basically, drug companies have to pay the FDA to review their new drugs before they can be sold to the public. It helps fund the FDA's research.
I see.
And ensures they have the resources to thoroughly evaluate the safety and effectiveness of these drugs.
Okay, that makes sense. So why would Kennedy want to get rid of those fees? Wouldn't that make it easier for drug companies to push through potentially dangerous drugs?
That's a major concern. Critics argue that eliminating these fees could lead to faster approvals of drugs that haven't been properly vetted.
Wow.
It could also severely impact the FDA's budget, limiting their ability to conduct thorough reviews.
So potentially more unsafe drugs on the market and a weaker FDA to regulate them. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It's a very real concern. And it highlights the potential for unintended consequences when you start messing with systems that, while not perfect, are designed to protect public health.
Okay, so let's talk about this revolving door thing.
Revolving door.
Yeah, I've heard Kennedy talk about that in relation to the FDA.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
The revolving door refers to the movement of people between government agencies like the FDA and the industries they regulate.
Okay.
So, for example, you might have someone who works for a pharmaceutical company, then goes on to take a job at the FDA, or vice versa.
And what's the problem with that?
Well, critics argue that it creates conflicts of interest.
Okay.
If someone has close ties to the pharmaceutical industry, they might be more likely to favor policies that benefit that industry, even if those policies aren't in the best interest of public health.
So it's like having the fox guarding the hen house.
Exactly. And Kennedy has been very critical of this practice. He wants to put an end to it, saying he wants to prioritize the public's health over the interests of big corporations.
Okay, so I get the appeal of that. Who doesn't want someone fighting for the little guy?
Right.
But wouldn't ending the revolving door also mean losing out on expertise from people who actually understand how the pharmaceutical industry works?
That's a valid point. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. And it's just one example of the many challenges Kennedy would face if he's confirmed as head of HHS.
So let's be real. How likely is it that he actually gets confirmed?
It's a tough call. Even with a Republican-controlled Senate, his views on vaccines are going to be a major hurdle. Some Republicans have already expressed concerns, and Democrats are likely to put up a strong fight.
I mean, you'd think even his own party would be hesitant to hand over the reins of American healthcare to someone who openly rejects basic science.
You'd think so, but remember, this is politics. Strange things happen, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
We've seen Trump make some pretty unconventional choices before.
True. So what does all this mean for the average American? What should we be thinking about as this nomination plays out?
I think it's important to understand that this isn't just about one man's beliefs. This nomination represents a larger shift in our political landscape,
Okay.
a growing distrust of science and expertise.
Right.
And that has implications for all of us, regardless of our political affiliation.
Yeah, it feels like we're at a crossroads. Do we embrace evidence-based decision-making, or do we go down a path where personal beliefs and political agendas trump scientific consensus?
It's a question we all need to be asking ourselves, because the answers could have profound consequences for the future of American healthcare, and that's something that affects every single one of us.
So we've talked about Kennedy's views, his targets, the potential chaos he could unleash at HHS. But let's get real. How much of this is actually possible? Can he really just waltz in and dismantle decades of public health policy?
That's where things get interesting. You have to remember, leading a government agency is very different from being an activist or an author. He'll face bureaucratic hurdles, political opposition, and the reality that governing often involves compromise, not just bulldozing your way through.
But Trump did say he'd let Kennedy go wild, right? Doesn't that suggest he'll have a lot of leeway?
Sure, Trump might give him some rope, but there are limits. Congress controls the purse strings, the Senate has to confirm his appointees, and there's a whole web of laws and regulations that even a president can't just ignore. Plus, there's the court of public opinion. If Kennedy overreaches, there will be backlash.
Okay, so let's play this out. Say he does get confirmed. What are some of the first things we might see him try to do?
Well, based on his past statements, I'd expect him to go after the FDA pretty aggressively. He might try to replace key personnel with people who share his views on things like alternative therapies and drug approval processes. He could also try to use his bully pulpit to sow doubt about vaccine safety, even if he can't outright ban them.
And what about big food? What kind of concrete actions could he take there?
He could push for stricter labeling requirements, try to ban certain additives or pesticides, or even launch investigations into companies he sees as engaging in harmful practices. He's talked about modeling regulations after Europe, so we might see him try to align U.S. standards more closely with theirs.
And that'd be a good thing. I mean, a lot of people are concerned about the state of our food system.
It's not that simple.
Yeah.
While some of his proposals might have merit, there's always the risk of unintended consequences. For example, if regulations become too burdensome, it could drive up food prices or stifle innovation. It's a delicate balance.
So it sounds like we're in for a bumpy ride no matter what happens. What's the key takeaway for our listeners here? What should they be watching out for as this story unfolds?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged. Don't just take Kennedy's words at face value. Dig deeper, look at the evidence, and form your own opinions. Pay attention to the actions he takes, the people he appoints, and the policies he prioritizes.
And don't be afraid to speak up. Contact your representatives, get involved in local advocacy groups, and make your voice heard. This isn't just a spectator sport. The decisions made at HHS will impact all of our lives, and we have a right, even a responsibility, to participate in the conversation.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's about the future of American healthcare and the kind of society we want to live in. Do we value science and evidence-based decision-making, or do we let fear and ideology dictate our choices? That's the question we all have to grapple with.
Well said. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us, listeners. Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay tuned. This story is far from over.